So today for Book Talks and Tea, we're going to be talking about The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I'm not drinking any tea. I just got done with work, so there's a water bottle right there. Ooh. Wow, that gave all my secrets away. Also, I'm wearing Budapest by NYX. This is my favorite color by them. I wear this all the time. I have multiple copies of this color. Great. Love it. Fantastic. So, we finished talking about The Couple Next Door last time, and I was using the term psychological thriller. Again, take a sip every time I say that. And I've been doing some thinking. I don't think that the three books that I'm talking about are truly psych thrillers. I think they're just more books that are thrillers or tragedies or what have you that have impacted me psychologically. Each of these books kind of really mess with my emotions, and I think, and to an extent, even my psychology. And I think that that's why I had the reaction that I did to these books, and so I'm dubbing them as what I've been calling them. Whether or not their true genre categorization is whatever. So, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Also, if I look really washed out, I have the blinds kind of opened a little bit to get some light in here, so sorry if I'm suddenly ghostly pale. Secret History by Donna Tartt. So, Donna Tartt also wrote The Goldfinch, which was the movie that just came out. I haven't read The Goldfinch yet. But as I'll get into, I liked Donna's writing, so I'm interested to read this book, The Goldfinch. And that's a Pulitzer Prize winner from 2014. So, as an idea, that's how good her writing is and the stories that she tells. So, this book, where do I begin? This book was suggested to me by my mom, and she said she really liked it, but she liked the writing, and so my mom and I kind of really pass books around, and so if she recommends a book, I'm going to read it and go from there. Sorry, there's suddenly a huge dry thing on my finger. So, how do I explain the story? Let me read the back to you. Under the influence of their charismatic classics professor, a group of clever, eccentric misfits at an elite New England college discover a way of thinking and living that is a world away from the humdrum existence of their contemporaries. But when they go beyond the boundaries of normal morality and slip gradually from obsession to corruption, betrayal, and at last into evil. So the main character of this book, who is the author, not the author, but the narrator, his name is Richard. And Richard comes from California. Richard reminds me a lot of the narrator of The Great Gatsby, in that he comes from this background, is kind of really self-sufficient, self-reliant, but falls into this world of extreme, I don't want to say extravagance, but of otherworldliness. So he applies to Hampden College in New England. I think it's Boston. Might be Vermont. Boston. Oh, I'm sorry. Give me a second. Yeah. New England. And he liked studying Greek in his high school. And so he's like, you know what? I want to get out of California. I don't really like my home life. I want to kind of just do something just wild. And so he applies to college at Hampden and gets accepted. While there, he kind of discovers a classics class that's being taught, but comes to find out that it's not really a class that's offered, and you have to know the professor to get in. So it's kind of like this professor has his group of students, and that's who he teaches, and that's it. Somehow, Richard gets involved and is able to get into this class. So I think there's 6 or 7 other students in this class, and they're all a year ahead of him. And because of that, they have this friend group. And all of these students in this classics class of Greek, Latin, come from old families. So I know that we hear that terminology a lot when we talk about England, but also like in New England areas, we hear the old families that have old money, have a lot of money. So there's one character in here. His name is Henry, part of this group of students. And he is wealthy, very wealthy. He doesn't really show it off, but he's wealthy. He ends up taking the group to one of like his summer house, his parents' summer house, where they hang out for the weekend. But it's just the students because, I mean, that's what they do. While in... So the reason that I think Richard is a lot like the narrator of The Great Gatsby is because you kind of get the feel throughout the book that Richard never quite feels at home or that he has a place in this group of students. It's this kind of feeling of unease, or I can label it as social anxiety of like, I want to be part of this group and they say that I'm part of the group, but I don't feel part of the group. That kind of vibe. And Richard just does this thing, but they always ask him to do weird things and what have you. Julian, who is the professor, they just call him by his first name, Julian. So it's already kind of created a really interesting atmosphere for school. I can tell you, though, the scenes of them in this classroom, or it was really, truly his office, is wonderful. So the office is kind of described as being this old office with a fireplace and dark wood furniture and a big dark desk and flowers everywhere and ancient books all over the place. Like this truly fascinating, deep, stereotypical classics professor office. And so when they would have class, they would sit near this big window and all the warm sunlight would come in, and it felt like a place that I would really enjoy. Kind of this beautifully timeless environment as they're talking about the Greek tragedies and the Latin pieces and learning to translate, and at some point, like they're even speaking to each other in Greek and Latin. Richard, as he's taking this class, gets to the point where he says that he's thinking in Greek and Latin, which is really great. Like that's the sign that you're learning a language. I studied Italian for 3 years. I lived in Italy for 5 weeks. I'm not to the point that I think in Italian, but every now and then I do speak in Italian. It's not good. So there comes a point in the book where an event happens that Richard is not a part of. But it's when they're at the summer house, this weekend getaway. Something happens. Richard is not involved. And he can kind of tell from moving forward that there was a fracture in the group. Something just didn't feel right anymore. And the book opens, so this is not a spoiler. The book opens with talking about, you have to read the prologue. And this one, the book opens with one of the characters had been dead for several weeks. And it kind of talks about, the prologue talks about, also I apologize for the horrible film quality. My camera's getting really old, I guess. But anyway, prologue. So the prologue kind of talks about the situation. One of the characters that had died was part of this group of students in the classics, and at the end of the prologue you find out that all of the students were involved in this death. So as you're beginning to read the story, you know that one of the characters died, and you know that all the other students are involved, and so you're trying to piece the pieces together, trying to figure out why, what happened, will anybody get in jail, like get put in jail, what's going on. His name is Bunny, is the guy that dies. And it stems from this event at the weekend getaway. And then it happens kind of early on in the book. And the rest of the book kind of is Richard's descent into depression because nobody else in the group seems horribly morally concerned that they just, in essence, killed somebody. That there's no concern over what is right. It's this kind of feeling that the students in this class value what they were doing with the classic material greater than somebody's life. And so we do see this, as the back of the book says, from obsession to corruption to betrayal and to evil. So we do see this descent. The end of the book, I don't really remember how the end ends. Julian disappears. And not as like, oh, he's disappeared, we need to go find him, as in he burns his bridges with the students. He doesn't even show up to the funeral. At least I don't think he does. The reason it feels like a Great Gatsby to me is, no spoilers, but if you've seen the Great Gatsby movie, you know how the movie ends. And it's this kind of feeling that Richard is much like the character, the narrator from Great Gatsby, is kind of left to put all of the pieces together. It's kind of left to be the sane person. It's kind of left to be, I don't like any of the characters in this book. None of them. But Richard is redeemable in the fact that he seems the most relatably human, in the fact that the morality of the situation and the urgency of the situation that he was involved. More of an accessory. He did not have a very blatant part in the act, but he was in the presence of the event. So he kind of wrestles with that. And he seems to be the only one wrestling with it. So it's, in that regard, it was a frustrating book to read because it was written in the way that Richard felt like the only sane one, and even then he wasn't making sane decisions. And so I just wanted to shake everybody. So I think Donna does a fantastic job of writing that. A good book doesn't always mean that the characters do things right. A good book means it can be lots of different things. And I think that Donna writes a really good book in that she is able to write a story where you don't like any of the characters, you don't really like the plot, you don't like anything that's going on, but yet you keep coming back to the story. At the time that I was reading this, I was working as direct care staff for a home with adults with disabilities. And this particular home that I was at, there was not much direct care needed. They were all really independent, and I would stay until about 11 o'clock at night. So they'd all be in bed, kind of doing their own nighttime stuff by like 9 o'clock. So I would have 2 hours to just hang out and I would be reading this book. And this book, the writing there's this overarching sense of just eeriness about the writing. And so as I would be sitting in this house, 10:30 at night, it would kind of make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up because it was just kind of this uneasy feeling. Donna's writing is wonderful. It's captivating. I remember the way that she describes things. Let me see here. She does a very good job of writing the tension of depression, of being part of the situation, of the lies. The way that she kind of writes from Richard's perspective puts an actual pit in your stomach in regards to what he's feeling. Her writing is lovely. I highly recommend it, and I think her writing is perfectly suited to a story like this. I don't like this book. This is not it's an atypical. I don't know how to classify it. It's not a murder mystery because you know what happens. It's not fantasy. There's a period there's a very brief period in the book where events that are described sound fantastical, but Richard is not part of the event, so he doesn't experience it as everybody else is. So you just kind of hear this idea of fantasy. It could be classified as like a realistic fiction, but even like it doesn't sit neatly into any of the categories. I recommend this book for anybody who doesn't get emotionally affected by books that analyze emotions and annoying situations where nobody makes the right decisions. I would recommend this book to people who like Greek and Latin. So I studied Latin in high school for only about a semester, and was really fascinated by it. And we think of the Greek comedies and the Greek tragedies, and there's a lot of really good stuff in those cultures and in that writing. This is a good book for anybody who's read The Goldfinch, I think. If you already have an idea of what Donna's writing is like, I think this is a stellar book for that. This is a haunting story. It's a haunting book. It's it kind of rattles your bones a little bit. And not because it's gory or scary or eerie. It just kind of rattles you in a way that I don't know how to explain. Let me see. So this book ends... It's about like 560 pages. So it's a thick book. I don't, yeah. I don't know if anybody has this experience, but have you ever been part of something that you know just kind of feels weird, but in order to be like a part of the crowd, like you just go along with it anyway, and or because you want to pursue something that you're making your own independent choices for the first time, and when crap hits the fan and it all dissolves, you kind of look at it and like wonder what the heck you were just doing with your life. That kind of weird, bittersweet nostalgia, this recognition that you can't go back and change events, that you could have made better decisions along the way and you just didn't. That's kind of the vibe of this story. Melancholy, almost. But not even melancholy. I don't know how to pinpoint it. This is a book. It's a book. It's a story. I would love to know if anybody else has read this book, if anybody else has read this story. What did you think of it? Did you like Donna's writing? Didn't you? Have you read The Goldfinch? Did you like any of the characters? Like, what were your thoughts on this story? I would love to know. So, that's the end for this video. Thanks for hanging out. If you have any book recommendations that you want me to read or look at or talk about, I would love to know. I love books. I kind of devour them ridiculously. And I'm always open for new suggestions. So thanks for hanging out. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.